Hi Sam, thank you for joining us and answering these questions. I think we've got a few to get through, so we'll start with the first one.
Brilliant.
I find it very hard not to take it personally when my teenager is angry. All I can think is how ungrateful they are being, and it stresses me out so much. We end up in a shouting match. I know this is not good, but I can't seem to deal with my stress in that moment. Any advice?
Yes, and yes. So first and foremost, I think it's probably a very common feeling for most parents to feel, especially when you're thinking of teenagers. Just to kind of give a bit of context, what's going on for your teenager or in their teenage brain? They're kind of fighting against the things they want to say, putting those into words, getting those out in terms of like trying to manage the feelings that are coming up, but also the thoughts that are coming up. And so you're getting the tail end of all those things happening all at the same time, hence the shouting from them. But for you, you're also responding to the fact that I think most parents will relate to, right? As parents, we're pretty much driven by, in lots of ways, providing for our children. Then we're kind of getting these kind of attitudes, or again, like you're saying, this shouting. It can bring up lots of stuff for us. So the fact that you're mentioning, you can recognize that pattern of what the thought is that you're having, but also know the fact that you're becoming stressed is really key. So in terms of advice, what I would definitely recommend is something I call the timing, which is to say, when you're recognizing those signs coming up for you in terms of the stress response, and that could be any number of ones that we mentioned in the webinar. So it might be the heart pounding or what have you, speaking fast, or again, just recognizing that kind of emotions coming up here. Say in that moment to your child, did you know what? I don't want to have an argument with you. Let's come back to this. Let's go and give ourselves some time to calm down and give it a limit. So you might want to say 5, 10, 15 minutes or so, and then agree to come back and tell them we're going to come back to. So maybe you might want to say, let's go and take 10 minutes to calm down, and I'll meet you back in the kitchen in about 10 minutes or so. But while you're separated, whether you go to another room or you go for a walk or something, what I want you to do is to take some really long, slow, deep breaths. What that's going to do is to calm down that physical response you're getting in your body, but also just to kind of give you that very thing I was just talking about, understanding where the thoughts are coming from, so you can kind of almost part them because now you know where they are. And think about what it is you really want to get out of the conversation. So key thing with shouting, it doesn't matter whether it's an adult or child or what the situation is or what the reason is, for all of us, when we're shouting, there's a reason behind that, is that we're just not feeling heard or we're not feeling understood. And that's again what's going on for your teenager. So you both doing the same thing at the same time is why the conversation's kind of ending up in there, is that both of you have got points you're trying to make and not feeling heard. So I want to suggest to you, when you go back in there, just reiterate, I don't want to have an argument with you. Tell me what's going on and just listen to what they've got to say. And as much as possible, focus on listening rather than responding. So you're really understanding what it is they're saying. Often when we're upset, 9 times out of 10, what will happen is we're saying things out of upset rather than a point we're really trying to make. So just letting them talk. Eventually they're going to calm down with you because you're being calm. And the more they're talking, the calmer they're going to become. And you can just give them little nods or asking clarifying questions. So checking in with them if it's a situation that's happened, like what happened, where it happened, with who. And all the time you're giving them that message, you're listening, but you're actually just gathering more information and giving yourself the opportunity to stay calm as well. And once you've heard them out, then you can take your turn, and then the conversation can be a conversation rather than a screaming match. So I hope that helps.
I think it sounded really good. Thank you, Sam. Giving it some focus in that moment when it's all, the stress is rising up.
Right.
Okay, so the next question, I understand about a positive mindset and what I want to be, but I find I can do that, but it creates a list of things I haven't done that frustrates me and means I beat myself up about what I'm not doing.
This one, I love that question. So thank you for whoever sent this one in. I'm going to ask you to do 2 things. I'm going to concentrate on the great one first, because it's my favorite. I'm going to be completely biased. What I'm going to ask you to do, I'm going to invite you to go and treat yourself to a brand new little notebook, and that could be a journal or a blank page book, doesn't matter, one that kind of speaks to you. I encourage people to get one that they kind of look at aesthetically, that looks beautiful to them. And in that book, at the end of each evening or before you go to sleep, write in there 3 things that have gone really well in your day. And that could be something that you've achieved or accomplished. It might be a new perspective you got on something, or something you've learned. It might be just something that brought you joy or made you smile. So that's the first thing I want you to do. But the other part of that is to tackle that list that's going on in your mind. And why that's kind of irritating and nagging at you is that it's all going on in your head. So I want to invite you to do is to get another book. It's probably, I'm imagining you're probably either working or studying or something of that nature. There's going to be a book that you write your little normal notes or things to do list in. Continue doing that, but do it in a particular way. So write your to-do list for the day, but particularly at the end of the work day or the end of your study day, and list on there the things that are not yet complete, but then also give them an order. So the things that are kind of priorities, put those right at the top, or number them. That's another easier way rather than writing a list again. But in particular, the things that you've been avoiding doing, so whether it's like paying that bill or having to be on waiting for ages while you're going through different departments and stuff, all those things you avoid, tackle those first. And what's going to happen while that list, the to-do list, is kind of depleting because you're tackling those things, two things are going to happen. They'll no longer be up here nagging you, but you'll actually see yourself physically taking them off the list as you accomplish and finish those ones. But in the meantime, you'll have your other lovely one in your beautiful book that's growing. And what's going to happen over time is this book here, the beautiful one that's got all the lovely things in it, is going to start replacing the one that's nagging you and just start reminding you of the things you have done, the things that are going really well. Meanwhile, you're tackling those. But at the same time, all that's happening is you'll see yourself physically taking off those things that are to-do list that have been nagging. So that list will disappear. And meanwhile, you've got this another new one instead. So as you keep creating that kind of positive mindset, you're actually making it physically happen as well. And you'll see yourself doing that. And that pattern will change for you too.
Amazing. Thank you.
No worries.
Okay. How do I support my 7-year-old child who is grieving their father and granddad too?
So I want to speak on behalf of myself and Sarah and everybody at Brilliant Parents first and foremost to offer you our condolences. I don't know if this is going to work. I'm hoping if Sarah's okay with that. Can I ask you to let me share the screen? I want to show something with you for a moment.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. So before I get into how you support this, something really important I want to share with you as well. And this is something called the loss cycle. And you'll be familiar with this in various different ways, but there's a particular thing I want to show you here. There we go. I'll share my screen with you now. So all of us, I'm sure, can relate to this bit if I put it in this particular order. So this is the loss cycle here. And if you think of when your child might have been 2 or 3 and you've taken them off to the park and you first say to them, all right, time to go. And then they're like, no, I don't want to go. And then you say to them, no, we absolutely have to go. Dinner's on, I've got to do this and what have you. And then it's begging, can I get a few more minutes? And you may well say yes. In between that is these 2 things happening. There's that first anger response they're going to get, like, I absolutely don't want to go, and they get a tantrum. Then after that, when they start asking you then, can we stay the 5 minutes? And most parents at some point will give in. That's the bargaining bit. So they're buying into the bargaining. But what happens is you go back to them and say, okay, that time is up. That's when you get the sadness, you might get some tears and stuff like that. And then eventually you kind of get them out the gate of the playground, you start making your way home, and over time they calm down, then moving into acceptance. That's the kind of everyday way that we see this loss cycle, and children will go through this all the time, and probably on a school day, especially when the teacher's saying, okay, playtime's over, come back in, and they're going to go and do something like maths. They'll go through that exact same stage. The thing is, why I'm pointing this out is that whether it's through that situation or it's because of a separation, or again in this instance as we've got a bereavement, your child and yourself are both going to go through these stages. So we go through it as children and adults too. And why I'm saying that is, for your 7-year-old, they're going to go through these different stages, and they may go through them in the pattern I've just described, or they may go through them at different places. They might hop straight from being angry to the sad part, or going to acceptance and then back out again, all of which are normal. However, what I would say, if it's in the first 6 months of if you're having had these losses, don't do anything in terms of considering counselling or anything like that, because those feelings are natural, and you may just see them come through them anyway and move into a place of acceptance and adjusting anyway. But also what happens, whether it's through friends, family, work, or what have you, in terms of your support network, for the first 6 months, it's normal for them to be around and offer some additional support anyway. So that's going to be enough in many ways. However, the other thing that I would also mention, and I think is something we're all guilty of as parents, one of the things that we do is to say we're being really strong for the children, and we don't necessarily let them see all of our emotions or the fact that we're upset and that we're grieving too. So one of the greatest gifts you can share with your child is to speak to them and let them know And to see you even cry even and just say, and name that and say that I'm really sad, and talk about that. And that will give them permission to also talk about their feelings. And it's through talking about what's happening that you can really do the support and say to them, I'm also feeling this too. And that gives them permission not only to talk about their feelings, but not to feel that they need to be strong as well. They will just emulate what's happening with you. And as they see you coping and managing, they also will. It's after that 6 month period, if you see that they're stuck in any one of those stages I mentioned before, then I would consider maybe going to the school or going through other services to maybe look at bereavement counselling. But to be fair, I'd also say, regardless of whether you find your child or yourself are struggling, it might be worth considering it anyway, just to help give yourself a space to talk about what's happening for you and how you're feeling anyway, and for your child to have that too.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Sam. I have a 13-year-old who gets very distressed if they are turning up late. I know they've copied this from me. I have changed my approach to being late to any function of event or even work. However, now my daughter gets very anxious and I'm not always with her. How can I assist her to cope with this?
It's a brilliant question, actually. And I love the idea that you're kind of thinking about building their emotional resilience for times when you're not there. So that's fantastic. In a moment of calm, probably when you haven't got to be thinking about too much going to anything, so probably on a weekend when it's quiet and stuff like that, there's a couple of things I want to introduce to you. So the first one is to introduce worry time. And worry time, you can call it what it kind of feels right for your family and stuff. But worry time is essentially a time when your daughter can talk about what's worrying her and just have you listen. And a really key point to do that is two things in terms of the time. One, to be consistent. So if you're going to do it every day, think about when it's going to be most convenient, so it's not interrupting anything else that you've got going on. Or you might want to do it once a week. But the message is for your daughter that that's the time that you're going to meet. So make sure you can actually keep that time with her all the time. And just let her speak about what those things are, because that in itself will just give her the space to say, in the moment of things, she will manage, because she's got that time to look forward to just let it out of her system. So that's the first thing. And the other thing is, again, in a moment of calm when you're not having other things to do, spend about half an hour or so. It might take a bit longer the first time you do it in particular, but what you can do is to get a piece of paper and just draw 3 columns. And in the first one, you want to put down what her thoughts are. In the second column, put down what her feelings are. Then the last one, put facts. So in this particular instance, let's say you're going to a wedding or something. Put in there first what her thoughts are around going to the wedding. So she's probably thinking about the idea you might potentially be going late to it and what might happen, that sort of thing. So normally you'll get kind of worst case scenarios, what her feelings are. So help her to then, and prompt her a little bit. So don't give her answers, but just prompt her. You might say things like, what else, what else, what else? In asking her, what are the feelings she's getting with that? So if she gets tense, where is the tenseness in her body? What signs is she seeing? And then the last one is what the facts are. So, and this is where you can really start asking questions like, if she was late and she was getting those feelings, what could she do factually with that? Because she stopped for a moment with you and take a few deep breaths, or just can put her favorite song on. Or might it be things like, how can she get herself prepared so she doesn't have to be late? How could she, what is the likelihood of her being late? What are the likelihood of you guys being, a number of people are late, especially if you're traveling by car and there might be traffic. There might be other things that she's not necessarily seeing. But what you're doing with this is something we kind of see called mental gym or mind gym, when you're getting your daughter to consider what the other possibilities are. And another way you can prompt her is to think about the positive. So I was thinking about, if you both got everything ready early and you left a bit earlier and everything was ready the night before, her thoughts and feelings and then the facts become different. So her thoughts might be fantastic, we're going to get there on time, you might go and get to see the area or the venue and take it all in and get a nice seat and everything. And the feelings are that she's going to be much calmer, and then the facts are that they've had a really great time. So it's prompting her to see what the other options in terms of her thoughts and feelings are, but also with the knowledge that if something is worrying her or she has another worry as she's thinking about the planning for going to this event, she's got that particular worry space with you that she can just let that all out, and you can think about that with her some more. So I hope that finds you useful.
Thanks, Sam. I think I picked up a few tips in there. Very helpful. Next question. My son was diagnosed with additional needs pre-pandemic and classed as 3 years behind peers with his emotional development. Due to the pandemic, support stopped and has not been reinstated. My son is struggling with school and having a really hard time there. He's been diagnosed with ASD and ADHD and possible dyspraxia. I do not feel supported by the school, and my son really does not want to attend, and things are becoming very difficult to manage. How do I support him through this and build emotional resilience within him?
That sounds really difficult. So there's a number of things I kind of got to mention to you, because there's kind of, I'm going to break it down the various kind of things that you mentioned. So first and foremost, you're probably well aware your school and probably hundreds of them across the country now are kind of going through exactly the same thing. One of the key things you can ask, if you don't know this bit already, is although it's not being reinstated, is there a plan that the school have themselves in place about what they're going to do instead? So is there another service, or are they having conversations even about that support going back in, not only for your child? I imagine there's going to be other children potentially in the school who are also not having support. So is there currently a plan, or are there conversations even happening about what else might go in, or are they going to reinstate it at some point in the future? So you can get some rough idea as to timescales at least for that too. And then the other thing, in terms of him having a really hard time, there was something I mentioned in the webinar called the fear ladder. So if you think with him a little bit about the time that he finds really most difficult at school, and help him to name what that is, and then actually can draw the ladder. They can be really creative with it as well. And that might be useful to have him actually make the ladder. He can get a piece of paper, or maybe use lolly sticks or whatever to actually create a physical ladder that he can see. And then get him to list all of the various things that he struggles with at school in relation to this one thing. So it might be a particular teacher, it might be a particular lesson, whatever that thing is, help him name that, but put that one thing right at the top of the ladder, and then help him to think about what's at the bottom, because going towards the bottom of the ladder. So if you put that one thing that's really struggling with him at the top, and that's the 100, what's a 90, what's an 80, and work it all the way down to the 0. And then in terms of the resilience, what you're going to do then is start with the 0, and let's say, for argument's sake, he's really struggling with the idea of going to school, period. And a 0 might be that he has a conversation, maybe one of his friends from the school. And then a 10 might be something like he gets himself ready for the next day to go to school and putting his uniform on. If he's not been going to school, these are little steps he's taken towards getting him back in there. Or if it is that he's already in school and struggling, it's taking those little steps that's going to make him towards getting into the school day that little bit easier. So giving him little practice runs of various different things all the way up the ladder until he's in the school and struggling a little bit less. What we're doing over time is building up his resilience emotionally by giving him the opportunity to take things that are small and kind of manageable and bite-sized, if you like, really practicing them and getting really comfortable in doing those things that he sees much easier to do. And all the time, you're going to give him loads of encouragement and lots of praise at the things that are lower on the ladder, get him to practice though till he feels confident, and then you're going to encourage him to move up the ladder until he's able to make this kind of school day and finish up the school day. So what's going to be really important that you do with this though is to introduce what your son's come up with. And it's really important when you're planning and doing the ladder that it's ideas he comes up with and that you're prompting him with them, rather than it's ideas you're suggesting, purely because it gives him some onus. And again, that's the thing that's going to give him the emotional resilience. But also, before implementing it or saying this is exactly what we're going to try, have a conversation with the school. You might even have a meeting with them and show them what you guys have been working on at home, and these are the kind of plans or things he's been thinking about that he thinks he can manage, and seeing how much of the school can come alongside and support you with them. So that's one element, but in the background of which you can have conversations. So in Hillingdon, you've got the Stronger Families team. You might want to go and speak to them about if you can get an allocated practitioner that can, again, kind of be a bridging gap between yourself and the school, and start thinking about what other support can go in for your son. And is there other services that can support, again, outside of the school or inside the school, that can help him to better manage his day. And so another thing I might suggest too, and you may well be working with them, because I know they're fantastic, but if you haven't already, and for our parents who are watching, we also have, through Brilliant Parents, parent champions, and they're absolutely fantastic at really getting alongside parents and offering that kind of emotional support in itself, it can be fantastic just to have someone else alongside to kind of talk about what's happening and offer some emotional support, but just to think about things practically about what your next steps might be and everything too. And I'm just also thinking in terms of your diagnosis, there are a number of different organisations that work nationally in the UK. So there's National Autistic Society that you can contact. And again, this is because anxiety is kind of underpinning all three of the diagnoses you've mentioned as well. They will have various different resources and teams and support networks and stuff that you can access for all three of those different diagnoses too. So again, I am going to hope that this has been useful.
That's really great. Thank you, Sam. Thanks for mentioning the parent champions as well. And yeah, some really, really useful information there. Thank you. So now we have my daughter's behaviour that can become worse at bedtime after 7 p.m. Can you suggest what would be the best approach in response to her throwing items, kicking or ignoring requests, such as putting on PJs or brushing teeth, choosing a story? I feel she wants attention. We have 3 children, including her, and she seems to struggle with settling down. She can become very hyper and seems to need a physical release.
Okay, so with this one, I'm going to say again, in a moment of calm, to have a little sit down with your 7-year-old and draw up a little timetable. And you can put on there things like the kind of hours they go to school and what they do beforehand. So it might be things like, again, brushing their teeth, having their shower and put their uniform and stuff on at the beginning of the school day. And then you can look out a little bit that says school. And then what's happening again in the afternoon after school. So if they've got any activities, anything like that, or the time when ordinarily you might have dinner and their bedtime routine in there. And why I'm saying this is you'll probably all be familiar and watching this and thinking about things like the little star charts and everything, but this is going to be a unique one for her. So again, getting her involved and getting her to put her stickers or particular characters or anything like that, give her some onus so it belongs to her. And then what you can do each part of the different sections of the day is just a reminder this is what's going to be happening. And then as she does each one of them successfully, you can give her the opportunity to kind of say, do you know what, you're recognizing them, and give her some real praise and describe what it is you're seeing. So if it is that she's made a real effort to brush her teeth, or she's read the book really nicely, giving her praise to do those things and moving her on the next one. And why I'm saying that is you're putting a lot of emphasis then on the things she's doing really well, and that will encourage her to do more of the things we try and encourage her to do anyway. But then the other part to that is thinking about what you've mentioned, is that you're noticing the particular time when she's doing that. That's normally an indication of kind of a couple of things, but one of them is that she's probably at that point already tired and becoming a bit overwhelmed. So it's worth considering, depending on what other things you've got going on in the evening. One of the things I've done with parents who have got similar issues with their children is to bring the time they have their shower and reading and stuff a bit earlier. So it's not immediately before bed, and so you can negate some of that. Argument's sake, if you're getting home from school about 4 o'clock and have dinner ready already, or if you can get dinner in as early a time as possible, give her time to kind of wind down, but then have her shower or bath earlier. And so the last thing she's having to think about then is bed. So you can go do some activities or wind down with her and make the whole part of the evening a bit more relaxing. However, I'm also hearing from you saying that she gets more hyper and needs to have a physical release. So again, what the things you can do is between bringing her home from school and having dinner is to provide that physical release then. So as I mentioned in the webinar, we kind of got positive stress and negative stress. And in her case, the hyperactivity that you're seeing is her level of stress and overwhelm that you're seeing. Bringing that into a positive means of stress is to find a physical way that she can have an outlet. And one of those kind of easy, quick wins, if you've got a garden, if you're lucky enough to have a garden, is to get her doing something, whether it's kicking a ball or something like that that's physical, or you can make a game of it. If it's a rainy day and you've got stairs in the house, to kind of say to her, how quickly could you get up and down the stairs? If you're a parent who's up for doing things like that, you might think about taking a pair of wellies with you as you do the school run in the afternoon, and let her have 10 or 15 minutes with the wellies on, kicking around the leaves, giving her some small opportunity, and it doesn't have to be a long one, but to physically get that part out of her system first in a positive way, so that later on she's already in a space of calm. And you'll notice with dinner in particular, children who are younger will kind of go through, especially after school, being really, really hungry. So getting dinner into them as early as possible is always a great thing. But then what happens afterwards, after they've kind of got that third and they've had a few carbs, the energy goes back up higher, and that's probably also contributing to what you're seeing in that hyperactivity. So giving her something to do, which isn't too focused like reading, but maybe something, again, that's physical, whether it's drawing or colouring in, painting, something that is taking our mind into something physical, but actually it's something more calming, would be really good, before then trying to get her to do the rest of the bedtime routine. And again, as you're doing those bits, just really praising her for the things she's doing well. And because she's going to want to get more praise from you and get that positive attention from you, you should see your evenings become a lot calmer too. So thank you.
Great advice. Thanks, Sam.
All right.
I think this might be our final question.
Okay.
So here we go. All of our children can feel anxious about going to school at various times. What practical tools could you suggest for boosting their resilience? Even if they receive positive praise and have good elements of their day, they can feel upset and procrastinate in the mornings as they don't want to go to school. We have talked with teachers to find out if there's any issues, but it feels like they are masking or holding in their anxieties at school, but then offloading at home. So teachers presume they're happy.
That's really interesting that you said that, actually, because masking or holding in emotions is kind of really common with school, and especially when you see children who are kind of, as you mentioned, procrastinating or trying to avoid or coming up with reasons why not to go to school. It's a good indication that actually at school it's positive, and it has its negatives too. It's positive in the sense that generally school is really predictable. It has a structure. There's a morning, afternoon routine and everything, and they know roughly who the teachers are going to be and all that sort of stuff. And so that part is really cool in the sense that it gives them structure and predictability. But what it also means is if they're particularly anxious children, they're having to kind of fit into those spaces and fit into that structure. So they're containing themselves a lot of that time. And then you'll notice between them leaving school and then getting home, you're seeing that kind of level of unraveling, which is the bit you're talking about in the masking, is that you're then seeing the outpour of their emotions and the outpour of their feeling overwhelmed, which is a good indication in itself that they're finding that home and with you is a safe space for them to do that in. But nonetheless, I can imagine as a parent, it's still quite worrying to see that. So for you, I'm going to say to do everything that I've mentioned beforehand in all of the other ones today. So definitely with each of your children, and you might want to swap this if you've got a two-parent family or you've got relatives or friends that your children are also particularly close to, that they can each have a regular time to talk about what those worries are in the first place. And again, keeping consistent and a short amount of time. So you don't want it to be a long time where they're thinking about these things that are really worrying them. But equally, they want to give them a message that is going to be a regular time and a regular amount of time that they're going to get to do that. So they're getting that out of their systems. That's the first thing. The other part was when I was talking about what those thoughts, feelings and facts are. So what are the thoughts they've got about going to school? What's happening for them physically when they're in school? So how are they containing all of that feeling of overwhelm? How are they containing that level of stress? Because then that gives us really good information about what we can do to tackle it. If it is that they're getting soreness in their stomach, or if there's, there's things going on in their head, and those thoughts, all those things that we get as stress responses, helping them to really name them also means we can find the ways to tackle those bits while they're in school, and they don't feel like they're having to contain and mask those bits in there. But equally, what are the bits we can do afterwards? So helping them to think about what the facts are afterwards. If they're feeling really exhausted, having held together the whole end of the day, is it going to be helpful to have a little snack or a drink or something when you go to pick them up or after school? Is it going to be helpful to have a walk home rather than getting on the bus or taking some of the bus journey a bit shorter and then walking the rest of the way home? So again, physically get them moving and getting some of that feeling out of their system. But also look at what the other facts are and help prompt them about what the other possibilities might be in a more positive way. And again, being careful not to give them answers, but just prompting them to see what are the other things that are going on. That said, and it seems like you've got a good communication going on with the school, because we've heard you mentioning that, and the teachers are talking about them being happy. Talk to them about what it is that you've shared and what you've gathered from your children and what they're going through while they're in school, so the teachers can also spot those signs and you can work together to see what else can be done. It might be there's little ways and most schools will have a method by which children can let the teachers know that they're struggling or they need a bit of time out. And some schools will have something like a sensory room or stuff. They can take time out just for a few minutes even to go and kind of gather themselves and calm themselves down before coming back in. And a key point of, I guess, especially for the school day, there's lots of kind of transition between one lesson and another. And for children who are at secondary school, they might be moving between classrooms and all sorts of things that can add to that feeling of holding in these emotions and anxieties and stresses and worries. So helping your child really think about when those key moments are that they're feeling most anxious, but also helping them focus on when it's less anxious, and see if we can bring some of what we learned from that into the times that are coming. Can they use some of those tools as well, or the things that they're doing, or the things that make it less anxious in the times when it feels more anxious, that they can help model themselves through the day, and again build up their own emotional resilience, sorry. Okay.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sam. And thank you everybody that's brought questions as well. I think they were, you know, I'm sure you will find some help from them, and so will many, many other parents who are watching this video.
Thank you. What I will do is send copies of some of the tools and stuff I've mentioned. I know a few of them are in the workbook and stuff, but stuff like the fear ladder and how to use it, I'll send those as well, so have a link to those as well.
Great resources going out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone.